now you're in for a treat with another fantastic talk. I get to introduce Jim Tolstrup. He's the executive director of the High Plains Environmental Center that is down in Loveland, just a stone's throw away. He has been involved with this conference since the very beginning. He's on the planning committee, he's been a speaker, he's done so much to support it, and the work that he and his team are doing at HPEC is really incredible. So if you haven't looked them up or checked them out yet, please do. And Jim is going to talk to us about creating a culture of native plant restoration. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and I think it's great the way this talk will build on what Jennifer just presented. And I put a subtitle on the talk, Decolonizing Your Garden. And it's not really meant to be a political statement, but when you say decolonizing, it really means like we're returning to our primordial ground. And one of the things that I think as a gardener is that the soil has a memory. That's a theme that I'm going to come back to throughout this. The soil has a memory, and everything that has happened here is in the ground. So we're returning to that primordial ground and uncovering what's here already. In a way that maybe this presentation has the wrong name, because we're not creating this culture. This culture existed here, and we're reconnecting with it. I also wanted to mention this picture, because if you Google gardening with Colorado native plants, I guarantee you this picture or some version of it will come up. And this is my dentist's husband's garden. And I just think like this is the holy grail. This is the paradigm. This is what front yards in Colorado should look like. So native plants provide a window into the cultures that have existed here for 10,000 years. And Jan Iron and her family were just here. They come to the High Plains Environmental Center every year. And we got to see a little bit of what that experience is like. But I'll say something about how we can look at plants that we go by every day through this lens and find a completely different meaning. So an example is, in the background of this photo, you see cottonwood trees. And a lot of people on the Front Range might say they're weedy, they'll break your foundation, whatever. We have our opinions about cottonwood trees. They really are the predominant tree of the American prairies. In the Lakota language, it's called Wagacha. It's a whispering tree. If you cut it down, there's a star in the center of the trunk. Wichakpi is the Lakota name for a star. Wichakpi, the flesh of men. When that tree is put in the center of the Sundance ground, people sacrifice themselves so that all living things can continue. So the flesh of men are offered through this tree, through the star. The star connects heaven and earth, and the tree connects heaven and earth. And so it's a prayer for the continuation of life. So if you see the tree that way, you don't think of it as a weedy trash tree. You think of it as as something sacred, something at the center of the universe. And that is something we can only get from the people who have lived in this land and the languages that they speak. This man, has anybody heard of Antoine Janice? Raise your hand. Antoine Janice. Antoine Janice was the first settler, permanent settler, here in Fort Collins. I say permanent settler because the indigenous people were migratory people. They followed the herds of animals that they depended on. But Antoine Janice was married to a person, First Elk woman, who was a relative of Chief Red Cloud. And in 1841, Antoine Janice came here to the Kashlaputa River. He said it was the loveliest place on earth, and he wanted to come back and build a home here. He was an interpreter at Fort Laramie, and he came down here with 700 lodges of Arapaho in 1858. Along with him came his two brothers and his wife, and his brothers' wives were also Oglala Lakota. Chief Bold Wolf said to these white men, "Do you want to build a home here?" And they said yes. So they had a council, and the warriors said, "You may build your homes between the foot of the mountains and Box Elder Creek." And that's how a community called Kelowna was created in the late 1850s. Antoine Janice lived here, had 10 children. His cabin can be seen at the Fort Collins Library, about 20 minutes walk away from here. They had 10 children, half Lakota, half white. And then in 1876, there was the Little Bighorn, and the United States Congress said, all Native Americans must be confined to a reservation. So Old Man Janice had to decide, do I keep the prime homestead in northern Colorado, in the mouth of the Poudre River, or do I follow the Lakota to the Great Sioux Reservation in South Dakota? He gave up his home and he went with his family. I think this is one of the greatest love stories, greatest American love stories of all times. And we should know this story. So this is how we started. This is how we started. And this connection got broken. And I like to use the word reconciliation. I talk about our garden that showcases plants used by tribes of the High Plains as a garden of reconciliation, because it just means we're coming back together. We're repairing that relationship. This is the Janice cabin, and the quote from Antoine Janice, where he came here in 1841, he said, "Look out the window there. This is the land he was talking about." He said, "It was black with buffalo as far as you could see. Scarcely nothing could be seen but buffalo." 1841. By 1880, the U.S. Census Bureau said an American frontier could not be found in the lower 48 states, and bison were less than 1,000 animals on Earth 39 years later. By 1890, all Native Americans were removed from the state except for a strip of land 15 miles wide and 90 miles long in the southwestern corner of the state. In 1915, Rocky Mountain National Park was created. Not one of these animals could be found in the state at that time. Things that are iconic of Colorado, the elk, bighorn sheep, they're virtually extirpated from the state. And the animals that we see have been reintroduced. Less than 3% of the shortgrass prairie remains intact. So most people who live in Colorado live on the Front Range. We are on the very western edge of the shortgrass prairie, which extends from eastern Montana to the Texas Panhandle. The High Plains, or the shortgrass prairie. There's a photo here of what it looked like, and that is in that photo is the Lindermere site at Stopestone Prairie, just north of Fort Collins. A little vision of what the prairie was like. But when you fly out of Denver and you look down, this is what you're going to see, these circles and a land that looks pretty beat up in my view. So a question, this is where I do the third grade thing. What do you think the average age of, or I'll put it this way, what percentage of trees in Colorado are less than 100 years old? Anybody? What percentage of trees in Colorado are less than 100 years old? Yeah, you guys are on the right page. I'm going by the statistic that less than 80 or 80% of the trees are less than 100 years old. So when you look out at those hills there, they're black with trees. That's not what historically existed. And the reason is when lightning struck, it would burn the grasslands, it would burn the understory, it would thin out the seedlings, so what we had was the ponderosa pine savanna up there to 8,000 feet. We had large ponderosa pines with grasses growing in between. Native Americans also have historically been very involved in managing the land with fire. Both the grasslands and the forest lands were managed with fire, which meant those animals that we just saw on the last page, the bison, the bighorn sheep, the elk, would have more space and more game so that the people depended on. So they managed the land, and fire was a major tool. This photograph is from right up there by Arthur's Rock, which you can see from here. And the problem with this forest is it's not the historical forest, it's an overgrown forest, and it's like a bomb on our back doorstep. This is not the forest that historically existed here. So if we say trees are the answer, I say you're not in Colorado. So the population of Colorado, after native tribes were removed, in 1900 was just over 500,000 people. By the end of that decade, or by the end of that century, 4.3 million people. And by 2040, 7.8 million people. So you can see the patterns that we're creating, and this is what the land looks like. It's not crop circles anymore. It's not outcroppings of trees and rocks and prairie, but it's this weird geometry that human beings have imposed on the land. And this, in that pile, is the memory. The memory is in the soil. It's just like as human beings, every experience we've ever had, every illness I've ever experienced, the food that I've eaten, all of these things have shaped every cell in my body. Even ancestral memories can be found in our DNA. And it's just like that with the soil. The prairie is there. Those ancient people, the bison, the seeds of the prairie plants and invasive plants are all there in the soil. And when we pile it up in a pile like that and we drive machines over it for a year, and then we spread it in your yard, and all the oxygen has been driven out of the soil. And then we do this, we water it like it's on fire. We put 18 gallons a square foot every year to grow grass. Then we have profoundly changed what happens on this land. Those two photographs, you've looked at the photograph on the left, and some people will say, like, well, what's there? It's nothing. It's nothing. I hear that from people so often. You know, a place that hasn't been developed, farmed, or anything, it's nothing. There's nothing there. The other side, there's something. It's been turned into something. But there's an aesthetic question. What is beautiful? People move here to Colorado because it's beautiful, but they turn it into something that looks more like, I hate to pick on New Jersey, but that's always what comes to mind. There's 40 million acres of irrigated turf grass in the United States. And here in Colorado, the average person uses 90 gallons of water per person per day to turn it from what's on the left to what's on the right. Our landscapes are on life support. We pump huge amounts of, I think it's 80 million gallons of gas are used to mow American lawns. Douglas Tallamy has really made people aware of this in his books, Nature's Best Hope and Bringing Nature Home. We have made this one of the biggest crops that we have in the United States. And as Jennifer mentioned, more herbicide, pesticide, and fertilizer are used per square foot on this crop than any other single crop. So then there's this. And if this is your yard, I am not mocking you. I'm sincerely not mocking this. This gets outside of the water problem. We're not using 18, 20 gallons a square foot for this. This is water that we don't have. You know, our water comes from the snowfall. We must let a certain amount leave the state to the Colorado watershed. And we're not going to make more water, but we're using more water. And with climate change, we don't know what's going to happen to that snowfall in the alpine, subalpine zone. So we're using our precious resources. This does get around that, but it doesn't do a lot to support habitat. There's probably a weed barrier under this, which is impenetrable. Earthworms need to get above the ground. Ants need to get down in the ground. A lot of things happen between above ground and below ground in the ecosystem, and weed barrier effectively cuts that off. It's not doing much for the urban heat island. Those rocks are going to be radiating heat. And what's missing is this, the intricate relationships that we have between the native plants and the native flora that have co-evolved over millions of years. So when invasive species are introduced, they tend to take off in the ecosystem because there's not things that will hold them in check. And these plants are, we could say, they're living by agreements that have been negotiated over millions of years. And they're critical to each other. There's a story about, I heard about this recently, a tiny little white flower that was found in the permafrost in Siberia. And they actually were able to grow this flower. It might have even been in the intestines of some animal. They were able to grow this flower. But if there isn't a tiny little bee or moth or something down in that permafrost also, that flower probably won't exist in the wild because it needs the pollinators on which it depends. So the plants need the pollinators need the plants. And by using the native plants, we are repairing the ecosystem that was destroyed first through farming, then development, then it's our choice what comes next. So into the middle of this whole discussion comes my lovely cohort, the Landscaping with Colorado Native Plant Conference. We are the same group who created the booklets that were handed out to you and the 2-page plants and pollinator sheet that you can find on some of the tables out there. We worked on a lot of projects through the Colorado Native Plant Society, and then we decided we were going to pursue this dream of putting on this conference 10 years ago. And so the question is, after 10 years of pursuing this mission, and people have worked really, really hard to present the conference and to change the way we think about landscaping in Colorado. So what has changed? And one of the things I would point to, this is a commercial development in Loveland. And what do I see here? Desert 4 o'clock, a little blue stem grass, rabbit brush, fern bush, Rocky Mountain juniper. Everything you see in that picture in a commercial development is a Western native plant. So that happened. A lot of legislation has also happened in this period of time. During our first conference, people asked about, can we collect rain from our rooftop? No, you cannot. When a raindrop hits your roof, it's already owned by somebody. Colorado was built on water law. And these go back to the original settlements in the 1860s. However, the House Bill 1005 in 2016 allowed for homeowners to have two water barrels that you must use the water on your own property. It also allows for rural people who have water rights to collect water in a cistern. It's a little bit more complicated. But the idea that you can't use the water that hits your own rooftop has changed. This bill was passed, which is probably the most significant one. This is the House Bill 178 in 2023. And what has happened a lot is HOAs say, if you grow native grass in your front yard, they'll say, like, you're not allowed to have that. You must have Kentucky bluegrass, or HOAs can prescribe and regulate what homeowners can do. The law changed that says, like, you can have a vegetable garden in your front yard if you want to. You can have 80% of your landscape be water-conserving xeric plants, and you can have native grasses and not conventional turf grasses. This may be the most far-reaching of all of them. It was just passed last year. It's not really enforced yet, but this says local governments will no longer be permitted to install, plant, or place non-functional turf, artificial turf, or invasive plant species. That means, like, your city will not allow you to put in non-functional turf. And that means if you're driving down a 4-lane highway, you're not going to see a strip of mowed grass in the center of that highway anymore. And this is pushing a lot of projects in very, very different directions. And I'm going to talk about some of those in a second here. Related to this is House Bill 1145, that is the creation of a special license plate to support pollinators. Pollinators, as I pointed out, pollinators and native plants are best friends. They depend on each other. It's related in that way. And House Bill 1117 in 2024 added rare plants and invertebrates to the species that may be studied and conserved under Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So this is legislation that I think is needed, and that is prevent landowners, HOAs, and landscape contractors from altering the ecological function of constructed natural areas and stormwater ponds by landscape practices incompatible with sustaining native biodiversity. And at High Plains Environmental Center, we manage open space for a lot of different landowners. And we see this all the time. We used to manage a property that had a huge expanse of milkweeds, the showy milkweed. And as soon as we didn't manage it anymore and a big landscape contractor with a well-known name came in, they immediately killed the whole thing. You know, it's like the kill 'em all, let God sort 'em out approach. Whereas our team, we might spray a Canada thistle, but we're not going to spray milkweed. We know one plant from another. We discern which plants we're trying to increase and which ones we're trying to eradicate. And landscapers just wipe it all out. It could be sunflowers like this that are critical forage for pollinators and birds, but they'll just kill them all. And this, I've seen this happen time and time again, that landscape architects will create landscapes that support these goals, and maybe the landscape contractor will be able to follow the guidelines for how this gets installed, but when it's handed over, the landscape industry is not prepared to manage this. And Darren, I don't know if Darren's in here, and Amy Yarger, and I, there must be in the other presentation. Darren, Amy Yarger, and I created habitat-friendly management guidelines intended for landscapers. So we don't lure pollinators to their death, but we create environments that will support pollinators, and they're managed in the same way. So now I'm shifting to, I'm going to talk about communities and projects where people have been able to do this and create large-scale restorations and focus on creating a culture of native plant restoration. And I'm starting with our home ground, Centera in Loveland. This is the home of the High Plains Environmental Center, is 275 acres in the midst of a 3,000-acre development in Loveland. An interesting story about this, when the developer, McWhinney, brought their plans to the City Planning Commission, the city said at build-out it would remain 20% open space. Their partner, McStain Neighborhoods, said, let's look at this 275 acres, donate, create a nonprofit, donate the land to a nonprofit, and collect a fee through development that would allow the nonprofit to manage this land in perpetuity. So a really forward-thinking idea where the developer hands this off to someone who's going to manage it better than they will and creates this 275-acre natural area. And there's huge marketability in that. By the way, the things that we have at the High Plains Environmental Center are demonstration gardens of native plants, and a visitor center, a lot of restored natural areas in the midst of the community, and a native plant nursery that produces over 30,000 plants a year. So this is me with Chad McWhinney, the founder of the company, and Centerra is the first community in Colorado to be certified by the National Wildlife Federation as a wildlife habitat community. That's something that High Plains Environmental Center pursued. The developer was very supportive and enthusiastic about it, and became so enthusiastic about it that is a major branding piece for the development. So Centerra Wild, and it takes a wild village. If I had my way, there would be a picture of a native plant in there and not limonium, but we're going in the right direction, and I'm good with it. So you would think in a community like this, you market it like this, and my thought all along is like, you market a community like this, we're going to magnetize people who are going to be really supportive of our vision, and they're going to get this, and they're going to come here because that's what it's all about. And a lot of people do, but this photograph right here, this is my pride and joy. This is the bioswale that's in front of our building at High Plains Environmental Center. It's an aesthetic thing again. I think this is beautiful. I go out there and if I get stressed out reading emails or looking at budgets, I go out and I watch butterflies in this garden and just enjoy the flowers. But we still get love notes from our neighborhoods saying, it's overgrown, full of weeds, not maintained. And people say, can't you do something about this? I did. It took me 18 years to do this. They would prefer to use native plants in a way that's more like this. And I'm going to just go back to this for a second, because the amazing thing in the last couple of years, I have seen a lot of large landscape architecture firms presenting, because I'm on the Centerra Design Review Committee, I have seen a lot of landscape plans come through with the intention of looking like this. Landscape architects are talking about matrices. We're creating plant communities. We're not going to have weed barrier, no mulch. The plants are the mulch. And this is way, way light years ahead of where it was 10 years ago. A lot of people would rather can it be like a conventional landscape, you just use native plants? No, we're doing something completely different. We're creating an ecosystem. I guarantee you this, under all this rock and steel edging, there's also a weed barrier and a dead zone for wildlife. And this isn't just happening at High Plains Environmental Center or Centerra. We went on, the HPC staff and board, went on a little tour of gardens in the Denver area. And I had heard about this, and I went by to see it at Quebec Street in Denver. And people either love this or hate it. You drive by there, and there's a big field of Rocky Mountain bee plant, and it's just the beginning of a restoration that's going to take years to establish, at least 3 to 5 years. And some people are like, why can't you do something? Mow this. There's nothing but weeds and trash. Other people are like, finally, we're making sense. We're doing something that belongs here and is beautiful and supports biodiversity. This is right here, also 20, 30 minutes walk away. This is the Fort Collins City offices. I think this was beautifully done. I took a picture of this in October. Everything's turning beautiful colors. I see rabbit brush, a lot of native shrubs, and little blue stem grass. This is as close to natural as I've seen in a large-scale municipal installation. And it's not weed barrier. There are some wood chips in between the plants, but this is creating a plant community. This is creating an ecosystem that can support wildlife. And again, aesthetic question. Do you guys think this is beautiful? Would you like your municipal office buildings to look like this. I think it's absolutely the right direction. Here's another project this is also in Fort Collins, and this is another dimension of the native plant restoration. This is looking at stormwater ponds, which is a much larger scale, and restoring it with native plants. When people first started doing this just looked like a lot of stormwater ponds. Once they were concrete pits. Well, to go a little bit further back, stormwater mitigation is required by law, because when you build impermeable surfaces like roofs and parking lots, you're displacing water and it needs to have a place to go. In the 1950s version of that is trap it in a culvert and just pump it raw into your local stream. Then people had water quality ponds that are just slowing it down, letting the sediment drop out. But then beyond that, why don't we use this to create a natural area? The plants themselves will remove nutrient runoff, and you'll have cleaner water when it leaves this site. At first, people hated this in the neighborhood, but it's called Red Fox Meadows, and after a while, they started noticing there's actually foxes out there. They have a big outdoor classroom that schools come to see it, and this has become something that is prized by the neighborhood. So this was created by Erin Murphy, a really creative businesswoman in the Denver area, really passionate about biodiversity, passionate about creating community. And she's done something really interesting with this program she calls Do It Yourself with Help Network. And in her mind, as a businesswoman, it costs a lot of money to have people on staff, to pay them year-round, or pay the unemployment for them, to pay their health insurance and so on. She had this idea, I'm just gonna have like this army of people, we're gonna come together, we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna do these projects, and I'll pay them, but they're volunteers who get paid, and they don't come to every project. She'll just have a sign up, and people who have done this before will come and plant a project. The homeowner will plant the project. So it's a party, it's a community event, and you can see from it, it's fun, everybody's smiling, they're having a good time, and they're creating something that is a better kind of landscaping with a really creative community model. Erin was also involved in this project, and Ari Peralta. Let me just say before I jump into this, there is a Facebook page called Gardening with Colorado Native Plants. And I just posted on here. I want to hear about your projects, particularly if it was a community creating a culture of native plant restoration. And these are the responses that I got. So Ari Peralta at Centaur Village in Lafayette wanted to take an area that was just irrigated turf grass and turn it into a large-scale pollinator garden. And she went to her community, she had meetings about it, she got people to contribute their ideas, she showed them how the design was evolving. The community was part of the creation of this, the community was part of the planting of this. And I think that's incredibly important, because when you built it with your own hands, then you don't complain about it, you love it. You love it, and it's something that you have invested yourself in, and it creates identity in the community. So I think that we all have a lot to learn with the way Ari pulled people together and got the community to really take ownership of this whole concept. This is this I got from Amy Yarger from the Butterfly Pavilion. So they have this Urban Prairies project, and they've done a lot of work in the Broomfield, Denver area. And this is a project that is called the Fox Run Natural Area in North Glen. And one of the things that Amy told me about this is that they have this Restoration Master Volunteers program, that people go through this volunteer program, and then they lead the projects because they've done it enough times, they know how to do it. Amy said, I wasn't really involved in this, I wasn't on the site that much. The program does it, and this is training the trainer and getting other people to go out and make this happen. This is one from Jen Busolo, who's on our committee. This is the CSU Spur rooftop garden. And they were experimenting at CSU Spur in Denver, a rooftop garden, and they wanted to try native plants, because native plants are adapted to bright sun, arid conditions, high winds. All that exists on a rooftop. So they were trying to see which plants did the best in this environment. HPC was one of the contributors. We actually have another contract grow that we're doing for a next phase of this project. And between this garden and the one that's here at CSU in Fort Collins, studies have been done about pollinators. These plants will bloom earlier, and they're a little bit stressed because of the low water, and so they produce more nectar. So there's an interesting, creates certain possibilities there for pollinators. You know, when it's one of the problems with the phenology that we're seeing with climate change is a certain pollinator might need a certain flower, and that pollinator comes out of dormancy 2 weeks before the flower begins to grow, because that phenology has been sort of interrupted by the change in the climate. This this whole area begins to grow earlier because it's warmer up there and so on. So an interesting study is going on, not only just about what plants you can grow on the roof, but also what wildlife that benefits. This is another earthlovegardens.com. Aaron Michael does a lot of projects like this. He is also very passionate about permaculture, passionate about community engagement, and gets people involved in these projects that are very high profile, and then writes about them on his blog and gets other people to learn about this model. This is one I got from Beth Walter at Shadowgrass in Longmont. And High Plains Environmental Center has done some work on Canada thistle in the wetlands there, because we're licensed for wetlands. But they also created this pollinator garden with a sign that talks about it, and little bee hotels and so on, a lot of native plants. But again, when HOAs change hands, they're not like, a city will make regulations, and those are on the books. And a developer might say, yes, we're going to choose this model, we're going to create this model. But it's not saying that when an HOA takes over that land, that they're going to manage it in the same way. And so these things can change over periods of time. This is an example. When I look at this, I was walking around our neighborhood at in Centera, and we 2 years ago had about a foot of rain in June. Really, really uncommon amount of rain. There was water everywhere, and there were amphibians everywhere, and it was just amazing to see and to hear and to just be out. And here I am in this suburban development, but it's just like it's loud with wildlife and water just flowing every place. And I went out there in a kind of a rapture, and I took this picture. But somebody else commented about the same area on Facebook not long after. Native landscaping? Sure, all these weeds might be native, but can you seriously call this ugliness landscaping? And again, it's a matter of what is beautiful. How do we feel about it? You know, I can tell you that that landscaping is functional. I can tell you that it's doing flood mitigation and it's supporting wildlife. In my view, it's beautiful. So now, I want to conclude with something that maybe could be read on a lot of different levels. We have a lot of conflict in our society. And how do we get where we want to go with these projects? Like I say, this person doesn't like what I love. So how do we work with this? This year, my wife and I will be married for 45 years. And one of the reasons, My wife is little, so I'm going to just give her a hug. One of the reasons we've been successful at this is like ultimately what do we want? Do we want to be right? Do we want to win an argument? Or do we want to restore harmony? We just want to be happy. We don't want to just have a war and destroy one another. We just want to reconcile and go back to just being happy. We get into a thing where we're just head to head with people, and these signs. I have to, full disclosure. I was right outside here with the March for Science yesterday with 1,000 other people, so it's not like it's beyond me to be part of this kind of thing. I also have to say, after having done that since the 70s, I feel a little despondent when I go to these things and think like we're still doing this and what has been accomplished. I also wonder what is accomplished in this kind of things. There are things that happen that people have to say, no, that's not okay. We have to say something. But then we have to ask ourselves, are we just making each other feel better, or are we actually convincing anybody of anything? And I was kind of taking this further than I meant to. I didn't mean to take it up to this bigger level, but even in our neighborhood, do we want to just like defeat the guys we don't agree with, and if we had nuclear weapons, we'd drop them on them because they're idiots? Or is there good in those people and a potential for getting them to understand what we're doing and why it's good? And there's one of the things that I said in the Suburbitat book is like, we are not suggesting that people make concessions. This isn't about concessions. What we're proposing is better in every way it can be better. It supports wildlife, it conserves resources, it's more beautiful. There's no concession involved. So find points of connection and expand on them. And I heard a talk from the director of Rocky Mountain Audubon. And she said a really interesting thing. There are as many people on the political right in Audubon Society as on the left. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, like, how can we kill more birds? How can we get rid of birds? But to connect is what I'm doing supporting birds, or is it wiping birds out? That's the important thing. But rather than just saying, like, blue guys and red guys, maybe we should just say, like, what do you think about birds? What could we do for birds? And this is where we win. This is where things make advances. In the 1970s, a lot of things we're worried about, the EPA and the Endangered Species Act and all that, they were signed into law by Richard Nixon because of the collaboration of Republicans and Democrats who just thought, like, yeah, we want clean water. That just makes sense. And so we need to build those kinds of collaborations. Provide good examples of well-managed native landscapes. This is a garden that I manage at just below P.F. Chang on Sky Pond Drive in the Chipunga Sculpture Park. I think this is a good example, but we're beginning to see this is one of the reasons we put out the garden grants. It's like more people need to do this and show people in your own community, and once people see it, they might say, yeah, that is beautiful. And in the 28 years since I've moved to Colorado, I have seen more and more and more people doing this. So we need to provide the examples, particularly of native grass. People don't have native lawns because most native lawns are terrible. They're watered like they're Kentucky bluegrass. They're full of weeds. They're mown within an inch of their lives. That's not how you manage them. So we don't have good examples, and therefore people don't like it. Patiently explain, providing detailed information. It's not an argument. It's not about like, we're right and you're wrong and we're going to prove it. But like, my cousin Sandy once said, one of the charming things about me is, when people don't agree, I think they just don't see it yet. And I think that's true of what we're doing here. We are right. This is a better model. People just don't see it yet. So the example is this man is Paul Oppler. He was an entomologist here at CSU. He died a year ago in February. During COVID, he couldn't do a lot here at CSU, so he came to the High Plains Environmental Center. He lived right across the road, and he started netting bees. He's an entomologist, but his specialty was butterflies. He said he didn't know that much about bees, but he was catching bees in the garden and counting how many species are there. And I've gone all over Colorado and said, native plants equal habitat. If you have the native plants, you'll have the native pollinators. But I never had the numbers. I didn't know what species, how many, what they were attracted to. Paul identified 100 different species of bees in our small garden, which is amazing. It's absolutely, if you build it, they will come, and you can actually have scientists go out and count them. Another example is in our lake, Houts Reservoir. Because of all the stormwater ponds that I showed you in that picture, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife says that our fish population is one of the healthiest, most diverse, and largest in northern Colorado. And when I say that's incredible, why is that? And he said, because of the water quality improvements that you guys have made. And it's built out entirely around these lakes, so it's not like a pristine wilderness in any sense. The booklet there is one of the ones that was created by the same group that puts on this conference. And it's just another way of getting the information out there so people can use it. Okay, this is an important one, and this is something that I just added this week. So I want to tell you a story. How am I doing? Okay, I'm doing good. Last Sunday night, I told you we have a nursery. We grow 30,000 plants a year. People who know native plants are coming to know us. They come to our place. They order the plants online. They come to get it. People love what we're doing. And we have a huge diversity of plants. We grow over 180 species. It is a labor of love. If you could make money on this, everybody would be doing it. But last Sunday, this happened, and we came in the morning, and someone had taken a knife and sliced our greenhouses from one end to the other, punched holes, slit open bags of soil amendments, took PVC cement and poured it over our babies. And then the staff came in the morning, and this is our labor of love looked like this. And the reason I thought it's important to share this is no one can do this work without grief. You're going to lose things that you love. And then the big question is, then what are you going to do? And I have to say, our staff bravely went around. They swept up the mess. They taped up holes. They salvaged what plants they could. And the next day, we're kind of growing plants again. We're right back on track. Yes, we get, you go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but we're still going forward. And I think that's incredibly important. We are seeing a lot of things going on right now where a lot of things that we love and care about are threatened. Don't give up. Don't give up. That's the message. And most importantly, this is from a short poem called Instructions for Life from Mary Oliver. Pay attention. Everybody in this room, if you have native plant gardens, you look into the flowers, you're like, wow, there's bees in there. There's all kinds of, you look into the flowers, you see all kinds of things that are going on. You pay attention, you notice stuff. Be astonished. Even with all the things going on in the world, if we don't go outside, like Jan Iron and the Iron family, we're so great at reminding of, this is a beautiful world. This is a good world. If we lose sight of that, we've lost the thing that recharges our battery and keeps us going. And tell people about it. Tell people, share your love and your passion for what you're doing with everybody. That's how we're going to prevail. I'm going to end with this quote. Celebrating our native biodiversity can help restore our relationship to the land and may allow the new civilization that we have built on this land to continue in harmony with nature. I want to acknowledge one thing. This is a New to Natives talk, and we were talking about this, our group, last night. For 10 years, we've talked about I did a class before, kill your lawn and save Colorado. We've talked about plant this, not that. More like, how do you get started? How do you get started on creating a native plant landscape? And I have to acknowledge that we don't have a lot of like, here's your soil preparation, here's the plants, here's how you plant, here's what I recommend for mulch, and so on. I did write a book about this, which is available out here if you're interested. There's also a QR code that leads you to where you could get an e-version of this. But all of us in this cohort are resources, and would be more than happy to share information if you want to know, how do I plant buffalo grass plugs, or what are good wildflowers for I live up in Evergreen or wherever you are, like what will work for me with all of the people we have. This is what we do all the time, not just at this conference. We all of us are doing this work all the time, and we want to help people be successful at this. So we're here as a resource. And that is it. Do we have time for any questions or anything? You know, I saw a teenage girl stand up at this rally the other day and speak, and she tried to speak over the crowd, and I wanted to tell her, never interrupt the applause. However, there's like a minute or two if we had a question or a comment I can try to answer. You're the first hand up.
Yes, I was just wondering how you felt about supplementing a native garden with annuals and containers during the summer, if there's any harm in that?
I am a gardener first, and I like plants. Plants are good. So I don't have any problem with that. I don't think that this is like a new kind of exclusivity. I would like to see function restored to our landscapes. But I have brought my wife armloads of lilacs every year of our 45 years, and I will always have lilacs because I have a heart connection with them. So I think you should plant what makes you happy, and try to plant what makes pollinators happy too. One more. Yes. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would like to say there's hope, because when I first came to Colorado, I thought this was the ugliest state. After 5 years, I started to see a few colors in red. But it really took me 25 years to see how beautiful the native habitat is. And so I feel lucky, because I feel very patient with other people, because I have to be, because it's taken me so long.
Yeah, thank you, David. Did you have a question? We'll try to...
You mentioned habitat-friendly management guidelines.
Yes.
Is there somewhere we can access these to contribute to our HOA?
Yes, yeah. Darren says we can put it on the website, so everyone could have access to that. It's a really good, detailed, but dense thing that you can hand off to landscapers that really help to alleviate a lot of the errors that get made. Thank you all very much.